The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such fear. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in their floating chairs, watching the massive screen that showed their doom spreading like a disease through space. Red dots marked dead worlds. Each dot had once been home to billions of lives. Now they were nothing but empty rocks floating in the dark. "Another system has gone silent," announced Speaker Vex, her blue skin pale with worry. "The Kepler sector. 23 billion souls gone in 6 hours." The room filled with sounds of grief. The crystal beings called Vorth made low humming noises that meant sadness. The gas creatures known as Luminari flickered like dying flames. Even the proud warrior race of Keth hung their heads in defeat. Admiral Thex slammed his forearms on his desk. His species had never lost a war in 3,000 years. Now he watched his greatest fleets disappear like smoke. "These things are not natural," he growled. "They eat our ships, they eat our weapons. They eat everything and make more of themselves." The entities had come from the empty space between galaxies. No one knew where they started or how long they had been sleeping. The scientists called them devourers because that was all they did. They consumed everything they touched. Dr. Nix pulled up images from the last battle. The devourers looked like giant worms made of black metal and red light. When they touched a ship, the ship would twist and change. In seconds, it became another devourer. "They do not just destroy," Dr. Nix explained, her voice shaking. "They convert. Matter becomes part of them, energy feeds them. Even the space around them bends to their will." The first attack had happened 6 months ago. A mining station at the edge of known space had sent a distress call. When rescue ships arrived, they found the station transformed into something alien and horrible. The rescue ships tried to fight. They became devourers too. Since then, the creatures had moved inward like a wave of destruction. Every world they touched died. Every fleet sent to stop them joined their ranks instead. "What about the reality bombs?" asked Council Member Zill, desperation clear in his electronic voice. "Surely those worked." Admiral Thex shook his head. "We used 12 reality bombs on their main force. The explosions that should have torn holes in space itself did nothing. The devourers absorbed the energy and grew stronger. The silence that followed was heavy with hopelessness. Reality bombs could destroy entire star systems. If those weapons failed, what hope did they have?" "The evacuation fleets report they are overwhelmed," said Captain Krell, reading from his tablet. "Refugee ships are packed beyond safety limits. We do not have enough vessels to save everyone." Young Ambassador Tix from the outer colonies stood up. Her people had been among the first to flee. "My homeworld of Altaria had 8 billion people. We managed to save 200,000 before the devourers arrived. The rest—" She sat down, unable to continue. The great screen updated again. More red dots appeared. The Vega system, the Procyon colonies, the independent worlds of the frontier, Alliance all gone. "At this rate of expansion," calculated the Council's best mathematician, "they will reach the core worlds in 18 standard cycles. The entire galaxy will be consumed in 50 cycles. 50 cycles. Less than 2 years in human time, though. The Council did not know humans existed." Elder Kex, the oldest being in the Council, spoke for the first time in decades. His ancient voice was like wind through dead leaves. "I have lived for 6,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars be born and die. But I have never seen anything like this." He gestured toward the screen with one withered arm. "These creatures do not want territory. They do not want resources. They do not even want to rule. They simply want to consume everything that exists and make it part of themselves. There must be something we can do," pleaded Ambassador Vorth. Her crystalline body was cracked with stress. "Some weapon we have not tried, some strategy we have not considered." But the military leaders had no answers. Every tactic they knew was useless. The devourers adapted too quickly. They learned from each attack and became stronger. "Perhaps," whispered Dr. Lix from the research division, "we should consider that some enemies cannot be defeated. Some threats can only be survived." The words hit the Council like a physical blow. No one wanted to hear it, but everyone was thinking it. Maybe the only choice left was to run as far and as fast as they could. Speaker Vex looked around the great hall at the faces of 1,000 different species. All of them showed the same expression: defeat. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was preparing to surrender entire sectors of space to an unstoppable enemy. "We will reconvene in 12 hours, she announced. "Prepare evacuation, plans for the Middle Rim. May the stars have mercy on us all." As the beings filed out of the hall, many wept openly. Others made the mourning sounds of their species. The proud galactic civilization that had lasted for millions of years was coming to an end, and there seemed to be nothing anyone could do to stop it. The refugee ship stretched across space like a river of metal and light. Captain Kira watched from her bridge as another transport vessel loaded with survivors jumped to hyperspace. The ship was so packed with people that she could see faces pressed against every window. "How many ships have we processed today?" she asked her first officer. "Lieutenant Minho." 347, he replied, checking his screen. "That brings the total evacuees to 12 million this week. But sir, the ships are carrying 3 times their safe capacity." Kira nodded grimly. Safety rules meant nothing when the alternative was death. Every hour they delayed meant more worlds would fall to the Devourers. On the main screen, she could see the latest batch of refugees boarding transport ships. Families clutched their few belongings while children cried for pets they had to leave behind. The lucky ones had managed to escape with their lives. The unlucky ones were still back on their homeworlds, becoming part of the Devourer swarm. "Captain," called Communications Officer Suna from her station. "We just lost contact with the Centauri colonies. That is the 15th system to go dark this cycle." The bridge fell silent. The Centauri colonies had been home to over 4 billion beings, from 12 different species. Now they were gone, consumed by creatures that turned everything they touched into more of themselves. Dr. Jiho burst onto the bridge, his research tablet in hand. As the fleet's chief scientist, he had been working without sleep for days, trying to find some weakness in the Devourers. "The pattern is getting worse," he announced breathlessly. "They are not just consuming faster. They are learning from each world they take." He activated the holographic display. It showed the galaxy with red zones marking Devourer territory. The red was spreading like spilled blood across the star map. "Look at their movement pattern from last month compared to now," Dr. Jiho continued. "Before, they would attack everything at once. Now they are being selective. They hit military bases first, then population centers, then industrial worlds. They have learned strategy." Captain Kira felt her stomach drop. An enemy that adapted was bad enough. An enemy that could learn military tactics was a nightmare. "What about our countermeasures?" she asked. "The new quantum torpedoes? The reality disruptors?" Dr. Jiho shook his head sadly. "Every weapon we use against them becomes part of their knowledge. The quantum torpedoes we fired at the Vega system yesterday? Today we detected Devourers using similar weapons against our forces at Wolf 359. The implications were terrifying. Not only could the Devourers turn matter into more of themselves, but they could also copy any technology they encountered. Every battle made them stronger and smarter." Lieutenant Nari rushed onto the bridge with a communication pad. "Captain, urgent message from the evacuation coordinators at Stellar Station 7. They are completely overwhelmed. Refugee ships are arriving faster than they can process them." "How bad is it?" Kira asked. 60,000 ships waiting in line. Food supplies are running out. Some of the older vessels are breaking down from overuse. And sir, fights are breaking out between different species over resources." Captain Kira had seen this before. When civilized beings were pushed to their limits, they often stopped being civilized. Fear made even the most peaceful species aggressive. "Send additional security ships to Stellar Station 7, she ordered. "And increase food shipments from the agricultural worlds." "Captain," Dr. Jiho interrupted, "I need to show you something else. We found records in the ancient archives. Texts from races that died out millions of years ago." He pulled up images of strange symbols carved into stone. The writing was so old that only the best translation computers could read it. "This is from the precursor civilization. They mention creatures that sound exactly like our devourers. Listen to this translation. The hunger that eats worlds came from the void between stars. We fought with all our might, but our order became their strength. Captain Kira leaned forward. Our order became their strength? What does that mean? I am not sure yet, Dr. Jiho admitted. But there is more. The text says, only through the greatest sacrifice did we find the path to victory. The price of chaos was paid, and the devourers fled back to the dark. Before anyone could ask what that meant, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. On the main screen, new red dots appeared on the galactic map. Dozens of them. The devourers have broken through the defense line at Sector 15, reported Lieutenant Suna. They are moving toward the core worlds. Estimated time to reach the inner systems, 16 cycles. 16 cycles. 2 weeks to save the center of galactic civilization. Captain Kira looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were good people who had never known defeat. Now they were staring at the end of everything they had ever known. Continue. The evacuation, she ordered. Every life we save matters. But privately she wondered if they were just delaying the inevitable. The devourers seemed unstoppable. Every weapon failed. Every strategy backfired. Every victory turned into defeat. Somewhere out there in the void, ancient creatures that had slept for millions of years were awakening to consume everything that existed, and the galaxy's greatest minds had no idea how to stop them. The evacuation continued, ship after ship carrying the survivors of dead worlds toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the red zone on the star map grew larger with each passing hour. Research vessel Seeker drifted at the edge of space, far from any known trade route. Captain Jiho stared at the navigation screen, confused by what he was seeing. The star system in front of them did not appear on any modern map. Are you sure we are in the right place? Asked Science Officer Kira, checking her instruments for the third time. The ancient beacon led us here, Captain Jiho replied. But according to our records, the system was marked as forbidden territory over 10,000 years ago. The beacon had been discovered in the ruins of a precursor research station. It was old beyond measure, carved with warning symbols that meant danger and quarantine. Most ships would have ignored it, but Captain Jiho was desperate. With the devourers consuming world after world, he was willing to investigate any clue that might help. Captain, called Navigator Minho from his station, I am detecting a civilization on the third planet, but the readings make no sense. On the main screen, images of the planet appeared. It was blue and green, clearly alive with oceans and forests. But the energy signatures coming from its surface were chaotic and violent. Look at these readings, Dr. Nari said, studying her scanner data. The inhabitants are fighting each other, constantly. Wars everywhere, nuclear weapons being used regularly. By all logic, they should have destroyed themselves long ago. Captain Jiho frowned. Most species went through a violent phase in their development, but they either learned to cooperate or they died out. A civilization that stayed violent, usually, did not last very long. What do they call themselves? He asked. According to their broadcasts, they are humans, Dr. Nari replied. And Captain, their neural patterns are unlike anything I have ever seen. Complete chaos. No order, no harmony. It is amazing they can think at all. The crew gathered around the science station to look at the brain scans. Human thoughts looked like electrical storms, random and unpredictable. Most intelligent species had orderly, logical thought patterns. These humans seemed to think in pure chaos. How do they cooperate with minds like that? Wondered Lieutenant Suna. They do not, Dr. Nari answered. Look at their history. Constant wars, betrayals, revolutions. They fight their own species more than they fight external threats. But something strange happened as they watched. A group of devourer scout ships appeared at the edge of the human system. The alien crew of the Seeker prepared to witness another world die in hours, as had happened so many times before. Instead, something unprecedented occurred. The reality warping effects that always preceded a devourer attack began to spread through space. These effects drove most species insane with terror. The chaotic distortions in space and time were impossible for ordered minds to process. Digra. Humans barely seemed to notice. Captain, Dr. Nari said in amazement. Their neural activity is not changing. The reality distortions that should be driving them mad are having almost no effect. On the planet below, human military forces were mobilizing, but they were not running in panic like every other species had done. They were studying the approaching threat and making battle plans. The Devourer scouts, for the first time anyone had ever witnessed, hesitated. They circled the planet but did not attack. After several hours, they retreated back into deep space. Impossible, whispered Captain Jiho. The Devourers have never retreated from anything. Dr. Nari was frantically running calculations on her computer. Captain, I think I know why. The humans' chaotic neural patterns create interference. The Devourers feed on order and predictability. But human thoughts are so random that the Devourers cannot process them properly. The implications were staggering. Every other species in the galaxy thought in logical, ordered patterns. That made them easy prey for creatures that consumed order itself. But humans were different. Their chaotic minds might be the key to survival. We need to make contact, Captain Jiho decided. This could be the answer we have been looking for. First contact did not go well. The humans detected the Seeker and immediately opened fire with primitive but effective weapons. It took 3 days of careful communication before they agreed to stop shooting and listen. The human representatives who came aboard were unlike any aliens the crew had ever met. They were suspicious, aggressive, and asked too many questions. But they were also fearless in a way that impressed even seasoned space travelers. You say these Devourer things are eating entire worlds? Asked the human leader, Admiral Suna. Her eyes were hard and calculating. Show me the tactical data. Captain Jiho displayed the battle records from dozens of engagements. Every other species had watched these recordings with growing despair. The humans watched with something that looked almost like excitement. Your people fight like amateurs, commented human General Minho, studying a particularly devastating defeat. Too predictable, too organized, of course these things beat you. The alien crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. Their military tactics were based on millions of years of experience and scientific study. To hear them dismissed so casually was insulting. Perhaps you could do better? Asked Dr. Nari, unable to keep the sarcasm out of her voice. Maybe. General Minho replied with a grin that was not entirely pleasant. We have been fighting each other for our entire history. We know a thing or two about dealing with enemies who adapt quickly. Captain Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. These humans were offering to help, but there was something unsettling about their eagerness for battle. They spoke of war like other species spoke of art or music. But as more red dots appeared on the galactic map and more worlds fell silent, he realized they might not have a choice. Sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places. The human ships arrived at the Galactic Council 3 days later, and they were unlike anything the assembled delegates had ever seen. The vessels looked like they had been built in a scrapyard by people who had never heard of proper engineering. Weapons stuck out at odd angles. Armor plating was welded on, in random patterns, and some ships appeared to be held together with metal tape. Admiral Jiho led the human delegation into the Great Hall. The aliens stared at the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Humans were shorter than most species, but they moved with a confidence that made seasoned warriors uncomfortable. You are the species from the quarantined world? Asked Council Speaker Vex, her blue skin pale with stress. That would be us, Admiral Jiho replied casually. Though we prefer to think of it as the world everyone else was too scared to visit, the comment caused murmurs throughout the hall. Most species would have been honored to address the Galactic Council. These humans acted like they were doing everyone a favor by showing up. Captain Suna stepped forward and activated a portable display device. We have reviewed your combat data, she announced. Your problem is obvious. You fight like civilized beings. The insult hung in the air like a bad smell. Admiral Thex of the Keth Empire rose from his seat, his forearms flexing with anger. We have fought wars for 3,000 years, he growled. We have conquered half the galaxy. How dare you call us civilized as if it were a weakness? Because it is, replied Human Colonel Minho without hesitation. You follow rules. You use predictable tactics. You fight with honor and logic. Against normal enemies, that works fine. Against these devourers, it gets you killed. Dr. Nari pulled up holographic displays showing the human analysis of devourer behavior. These creatures feed on order, she explained. Every logical battle plan you make, they absorb and counter. Every organized formation you use, they turn into their advantage. You are literally feeding them with your military discipline. Council member Zill leaned forward in his floating chair. Then what do you suggest? Chaos? Exactly, said Admiral Jiho with a grin that made several delegates shift nervously. Pure, beautiful chaos. Random tactics that change every few minutes. Contradictory orders that make no strategic sense. Deliberate confusion that even we do not understand. The hall erupted in shocked voices. The idea went against every principle of civilized warfare that had been developed over millions of years. You are talking about madness, protested Elder Kex. How can an army function without order and discipline? Human General Kira stood up and walked to the center of the hall. Let me tell you about human military history, she said. We have a saying, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. We learned long ago that the side that adapts fastest usually wins. She activated another display showing human conflicts from their homeworld. In our greatest victories, we won by doing things that made no sense. We attacked when we should have defended. We retreated when we should have advanced. We used weapons in ways they were never designed for. Dr. Jiho, a human scientist, stepped forward with his research. Tablet, we ran computer simulations based on your battle data, he said. Every time we used standard galactic military doctrine, the Devourers won. But when we introduced random elements and chaotic tactics, something interesting happened. The display showed battle simulations where human ships moved in seemingly random patterns, fired at empty space, then suddenly converged on Devourer formations with devastating effect. The Devourers could not predict what we would do next. Dr. Jiho continued. Their ability to adapt requires pattern recognition, but if there is no pattern to recognize, they become confused and vulnerable. Council Speaker Vex looked around the hall at the faces of her fellow delegates. She could see fear in their eyes, but also desperate hope. What you are proposing, she said carefully, would require us to abandon everything we believe about proper military conduct. Our entire civilization is based on order, logic, and predictable behavior. Then your civilization is going to die, Admiral Jiho replied bluntly. The Devourers are less than 10 cycles away from your core worlds. You can either change how you fight, or you can become extinct with your principles intact. The harsh words caused angry muttering throughout the hall, but no one could argue with the facts. Every conventional attack had failed. Every logical strategy had been turned against them. Young Ambassador Tix stood up from the outer colony delegation. What would you need from us? She asked quietly. Command authority, General Kira answered immediately. Our people need to lead the combined fleets. We know chaos. You do not. If you try to control us or impose your military structure on our tactics, everyone dies. The request caused another uproar. The idea of giving military command to a primitive species was almost unthinkable. But as reports came in of more worlds falling to the Devourers, the debate began to shift. Admiral Thex, despite his earlier anger, was the first to speak in favor of the proposal. My fleets are being destroyed, he admitted grudgingly. If these humans can do better, let them try. One by one, other military leaders agreed. The choice was becoming clear. Embrace chaos and possibly survive, or maintain order and certainly die. The vote was close, but it passed. For the first time in galactic history, an unknown species would lead the combined forces of civilization into battle. As the humans prepared to take command, many delegates wondered if they had just made the biggest mistake in the history of the galaxy. The final battle began in the Nexus system, where the last great fleet of the galaxy had gathered to make their stand. Over 10,000 ships from dozens of species floated in formation, waiting for the end of everything they had ever known. Admiral Jiho stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the enemy approach. The Devourers came like a black tide across space, their twisted forms blotting out the stars. There were millions of them, more than anyone had ever seen in one place. "All ships, this is Admiral Jiho," he broadcast to the combined fleet. "Remember, nothing we do today should make sense to anyone, including ourselves. Execute Pattern Chaos 1. The human ships moved first, breaking formation in ways that made experienced military officers gasp in horror. They scattered in random directions, some flying straight toward the enemy, others turning away as if fleeing. Captain Suna led a squadron of converted cargo ships directly into the heart of the Devourer swarm. Her ships should have been destroyed, instantly. But something strange happened instead. The Devourers, expecting organized resistance, paused in confusion when faced with ships that seemed to have no plan at all. "Now!" Suna shouted into her communicator. "Execute the impossible. Maneuver!" Her ships suddenly spun around and began firing at empty space. The energy beams missed the Devourers completely, but they created interference patterns that disrupted the creatures' ability to coordinate their attack. On the other side of the battlefield, Colonel Minho was leading an even more bizarre assault. His ships were flying in a pattern that looked like a child's drawing of a flower. It made no military sense, but it confused the Devourers so much that they began attacking each other by mistake. "This is insane," muttered Admiral Thex from his command ship. But he had to admit that the human tactics were working. For the first time in months, the Devourers were taking losses. The key moment came when Dr. Nari made a discovery that changed everything. From her research vessel, she was monitoring the Devourers' communication patterns. "Admiral Jiho," she called over the radio. "I found their weakness. They are not just consuming order, they are trying to become perfect order, but our chaos is creating paradoxes they cannot solve." The implications hit Jiho immediately. All ships began broadcasting random noise on all frequencies. Not just radio, but reality itself. Create as much confusion as possible. Human ships began transmitting pure chaos into space. Their computers generated random numbers and broadcast them as energy patterns. Their crews shouted nonsense words and jokes into their communicators. Some ships even started playing human music, which sounded like organized noise to most alien ears. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and devastating. The creatures that had consumed entire worlds began to writhe and twist in apparent pain. Their perfect forms started to break apart as they tried to process information that made no sense. General Kira saw the opportunity and seized it. "All human vessels charge the main Devourer cluster. Maximum Chaos Protocol." What followed was the most beautiful and terrifying display of military madness anyone had ever witnessed. Human ships dove into formations that should have caused them to crash into each other, but somehow they missed by inches. They fired weapons in seemingly random directions, but the shots combined to create devastating attacks on the confused Devourers. The alien ships of the Galactic Fleet watched in amazement as their human allies turned warfare into an art form of controlled insanity. Orders were given and immediately contradicted. Battle plans changed every few seconds. Some human pilots even flew their ships upside down just because it felt right. Dr. Jiho made the final breakthrough when he realized what the ancient precursor texts had meant. "The price of chaos," he whispered to himself, then shouted into his communicator. "Admiral, we need to amplify the chaos field. Use our own neural patterns as a weapon." Human ships began broadcasting their own brainwaves into space. The chaotic, unpredictable thoughts of human minds created a reality storm that the Devourers could not absorb or understand. The creatures that had adapted to every other form of attack found themselves facing something completely outside their experience. One by one, the massive Devourer entities began to collapse. Their forms unraveled as they tried desperately to process the contradictions the humans had introduced into their perfect system of consumption. The remaining Devourers, for the first time in their ancient existence, chose retreat over victory. They fled back toward the empty space between galaxies, their forms breaking apart as they ran from the chaos they could not conquer. As the last of the enemy disappeared into the void, silence fell across the battlefield. The combined fleet floated, in space, hardly able to believe what had just happened. "Did we win?" asked Captain Suna over the radio. "I think so," Admiral Jiho replied. sounding as surprised as everyone else. Though I am not entirely sure how. The galactic fleet returned, to their homeworlds as heroes, but the victory came with uncomfortable questions. The galaxy had been saved by embracing the very chaos their civilization had spent millions of years trying to eliminate. Council Speaker Vex met with Admiral Jiho after the battle. "Your people have saved us all," she said. "But I must ask, what do you want in return?" Jiho smiled, and there was something both comforting and unsettling in his expression. "Nothing you are not willing to give. We just hope that next time you meet something you do not understand, you remember that different does not always mean wrong." The humans returned to their quarantined world, leaving the galaxy to rebuild and reflect. The story of their victory spread to every inhabited system, becoming legend. It was the tale of how chaos saved order, and how sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to become something they cannot comprehend.